Today's episode is sponsored by Dashlane. You've probably heard of identity protection, password managers, and VPNs, but do you have them? Are you using them? Well, if not, you certainly should be. And the best way to do that is with Dashlane, which is a one-stop shop for all of your digital identity protection needs. If your passwords are the same, that's a bad idea. You can use Dashlane's password manager to create and securely store complex and unique passwords, making it less likely that your accounts are going to be compromised. They also have a VPN as part of their service, meaning that you can browse the internet securely and confidently, even on public Wi-Fi. Plus, Dashlane does what it's always done. It stores your passwords, it keeps your personal data secure, it fills all of those annoying boxes for payment info and passwords for you. A lot of Dashlane is free, but there are some premium upgrades and you can buy those if you want. But the first 200 people can enjoy an exclusive 10% off Dashlane Premium with the discount code VisualPolitik, which you can use at dashlane.com/VisualPolitik. So go protect yourself right now, and let's get into today's video.
I regret the day I said yes to Mr. Trump. I regret all the help and support I gave him along the way. I am ashamed of my own failings.
February the 27th, 2019. Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's lawyer and trusted sidekick for the last decade, appeared before the US Congress. His statement was a bombshell against the president. Cohen accused Trump of cooperating with Russia during the election campaign, as well as several tax crimes. He also described Donald Trump as a racist, a con man, and a cheat.
I am ashamed because I know what Mr. Trump is. He is a racist, he is a con man, and he is a cheat.
A little impressed by that, frankly. He could have gone all out. He only won about 95% instead of 100%.
So, Divya, while Michael Cohen was talking about Donald Trump, the President of the United States himself was thousands of kilometers away from Washington on a trip in Hanoi, the Vietnamese capital, to meet with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-Un in what was the second summit between the two leaders.
But I think having a fake hearing like that and having it in the middle of this very important summit is really a terrible thing.
This is a summit that has been dismissed by most of the media as a failure. And this leaves us with a big question. Well, was the Hanoi Summit really a failure? Where exactly did the negotiations between the United States and North Korea end up? Well, let's take a look. Alright, so there are some exceptions, but generally sequels are never as exciting as the original, right?
Speed 2, cruise control.
Well, it looks like something similar happened in Hanoi. Just 8 months after the historic first meeting in Singapore, Donald Trump and Kim Jong-Un, they saw each other again. Expectations were that this time a concrete agreement would be reached with deadlines, goals, and objectives. However, that didn't happen. The summit ended hastily without any specific understanding. On the one hand, North Korea demanded that all international sanctions be eliminated in exchange for dismantling its main nuclear complex, not the only one it has, the Yongbyon complex, a center dedicated to the production of plutonium and uranium fuel for North Korea's nuclear weapons. On the one hand, the United States demanded that North Korea take the first step, dismantling all of its nuclear programs' production and development centers, including all the clandestine centers. After this, they would contemplate lifting the international sanctions. As you can see, their positions weren't entirely compatible. North Korea didn't want to give up its nuclear program, and the United States wasn't willing to make concessions at all.
The dilemma that we were confronted with is the North Koreans at this point are unwilling to impose a complete freeze on their weapons of mass destruction programs. So to give many, many billions of dollars in sanctions relief would in effect put us in a position of subsidizing the ongoing development of weapons of mass destruction in North Korea, a State Department official speaking to the Washington Post.
But don't think this came as a surprise. It's true, Donald Trump did seem very upbeat, thinking that in exchange for guaranteeing a splendid future for North Korea with investments and economic development, he'd managed to convince Kim Jong-un to change his ways. Well, check this out.
Our United States team has arrived in North Korea to make arrangements for the summit between Kim Jong-un and myself. I truly believe North Korea has brilliant potential We'll be a great economic and financial nation one day. Kim Jong-Un agrees with me on this. It will happen. Donald Trump.
But the truth is that his team was much less optimistic.
North Korea will seek to retain its WMD capabilities and is unlikely to completely give up its nuclear weapons and production capabilities because its leaders ultimately view nuclear weapons as critical to regime survival.
Both Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and National Security Advisor John Bolton had expressed their doubts about being able to reach an agreement. The fact is that this is what every media source has been told and is the reason why the summit was considered a true failure. But hold on a second, because the question we want to answer is, well, was it really a failure? Well, yeah, it kind of was, but also no. Dear viewer, let's be upfront about this. On VisualPolitik, we don't exactly sympathize with Donald Trump, but we always want to be objective, which is not the same as being neutral. So we believe that we can give you 3 reasons why the summit, unlike what most of the media have said, wasn't an absolute failure. So listen up.
Objective: Vietnam.
Although it often goes unnoticed, with more than 90 million inhabitants, Vietnam has not only become one of the fastest growing economies in the world in the last 3 decades, but it's also become increasingly important to the United States. Yes, it may be surprising, but these 2 countries that less than half a century ago were protagonists of one of the longest and harshest wars in history are now 2 significant economic and political partners. You want more proof of this tight relationship? In March of 2018, the aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson set sail for 4 days in Da Nang. It was the first visit to Vietnam by a US military ship since the end of the war in 1975. The point is that Donald Trump's visit didn't have only one goal, but rather 2. Allow me to explain. The White House took advantage of this trip to strengthen its ties with the Vietnamese government. Trump met both the president and the prime minister and presided over a symbolic act in which several Vietnamese airlines commissioned more than $20 billion to purchase aircraft and services from American companies, in particular Boeing. In addition, they mapped out a free trade agreement and the sale of billions of dollars of military equipment. That's because the United States wants to turn Vietnam into one of its most important partners in this area of the world, both politically and economically. Why? Well, because Vietnam is growing by leaps and bounds. Further, it's very open to trade, it's got unfriendly relations with China, and its workforce has very low labor costs. In other words, it's a perfect country to flood with dollars. Although I'm not sure how Trump's going to cope with the fact that the United States has a trade deficit with Vietnam of almost $40 billion. For its part, Vietnam aims to receive all of those dollars to accelerate its development, its autonomy from China, and its leadership in Southeast Asia.
Hanoi is desperate for a better relationship with Washington and would like a free trade agreement with the Trump administration to ensure it is not entirely dependent on Chinese markets and consumers. Vietnam also would love to purchase large amounts of advanced U.S. military equipment. Harry J. Kazianis, Director of Korean Studies at the Center for the National Interest.
Well, what better way than giving Vietnam the prominence and political influence of hosting a summit of this type? And if they also use it to strengthen ties, well, that's even better, wouldn't you agree? Well, that's precisely what happened.
Cards on the table.
In a VisualPolitik video about the Singapore summit, we explained how North Korea's concept of what denuclearizing the Korean peninsula means and how it's very different from what the rest of the world understands. North Korea has no intention of giving up its nuclear weapons, at least not in such a straightforward way. It'll probably come as no surprise when I say that the North Korean regime is a cruel dictatorship with an absolutely abominable track record when it comes to human rights. Isolated from the rest of the world and ruled with an iron fist by 3 generations of the family of the current leader Kim Jong-Un, we're talking about a country where citizens can be sent to prison for simply watching, reading, or listening to international media. It's a country where any dissent or disagreement about the government can lead to brutal re-education and forced labor camps. It's a country with a state that exploits its own people by making them work in semi-slavery conditions. Well, despite all of this, Donald Trump's desire to push through his precious agreement, along with his predilection for dictators and authoritarian positions, glossed over the true nature of the policies of Pyongyang.
Everyone's looking out for their own interests. No one's looking out for the interests of North Korea's citizens. Brad Adams, Asia Director of Human Rights Watch.
Be very surprised. Very smart, very good negotiator.
Really, he's got a great personality. He's a, funny guy. He's a very smart guy. He's a great negotiator. He loves his people. Not that I'm surprised by that, but he loves his people.
Mm-hmm. Don't let anyone think anything different.
Right.
He speaks and his people sit up at attention. I want my people to do the same.
Well, thanks to this failed summit, the cards have remained on the table. Kim Jong-un's regime has no intention of giving up its power or its nuclear weapons. And let's make this clear. Forcing North Korea to acknowledge this stance publicly actually strengthens the United States for any future negotiations. Now any expectations for subsequent agreements have dropped, and that was needed.
Actually, it was a very productive 2 days, but sometimes you have to walk.
Washington has gained the upper hand in the negotiations, which they will continue to flex because they know North Korea desperately needs to overcome its sanctions. Now this all leads us to our third point.
The reforms. Everything depends on the reforms.
Folks, just 30 years ago, Vietnam was in an even worse situation than North Korea. The country was shattered by wars and suffering from a blockade from China, the United States, Europe, and even its Southeast Asian neighbors. Its economy, it was literally sunk, leaving about 70% of its inhabitants to live in extreme poverty. Since then, they've changed a lot. Today, only around 3% of Vietnam's population lives in extreme poverty. That's a massive reduction, 70% to 3%. Well, the fact is that Vietnam unilaterally implemented its own reform plan known as the Doi Moi. They started doing this even before they reconciled with the international community. That is, they were doing this while they were suffering a blockade from the United States. And what could be a better example for North Korea? What better action to involve Vietnam in this process and set it up as an example? It's a great way to let Pyongyang know what they could achieve.
The success of the Vietnamese economy is due to its decision to normalize relations with the United States in 1995. I would say to our North Korean friends that as long as they have a conflict with the United States, they will not be able to develop their economy properly. Major General Nguyen Le Van Quang, former director of the Institute of Strategic Studies at the Vietnamese Ministry of Public Security.
We've told you in several videos, which we'll link to in the description, that Kim Jong-un seems determined to promote economic reforms and open North Korea. Well, what better way to persuade him than by showing him the results firsthand?
No revolutionary tasks stand before us other than the improvement of the economy and people's daily lives. Kim Jong-un.
Folks, the United States seems to know that the North Korean problem will only be solved with a new strategy that focuses more on trade than on weapons. Maybe the summit didn't have the expected results, but does that mean it was a failure? The answer's not so clear at first glance, especially if we consider the White House's new strategy.
We are not going to invade North Korea. We are not seeking to topple the North Korean regime. We are ready for a different future. It's bigger than denuclearization. I'm absolutely convinced, and more importantly, the President of the United States is convinced that it's time to move past 70 years of war and hostility on the Korean Peninsula. There is no reason for this conflict to persist any longer. Stephen R. Began, the U.S. Special Representative for North Korea.
So what do you think? Do you support the Trump administration's strategy towards North Korea? Well, leave your answer in the comments below as well as in this survey, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please do hit that like button if you did, and don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos. Also, please do check out our friends at Reconsider Media. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. Also, this video is brought to you by Dashlane. For that special discount, please do check them out through the description below. And as always, I'll I'll see you next time.
Be very surprised. Very smart, very good negotiator.
Really, he's got a great personality. He's a, funny guy. He's a very smart guy. He's a great negotiator. He loves his people. Not that I'm surprised by that, but he loves his people.
Don't let anyone think anything different. He speaks and his people sit up at attention. I want my people to do the same.